All right, everyone, welcome. There are a couple of handouts moving around. One of them is for the lecture today, and the other one is just some of my materials that I offer. So thank you all very, very much. It's a pleasure to be here in front of you. I have a tendency to run a little bit of nerves about the first 5-10 minutes that I talk, so allow me to take a few deep breaths. And when I get rolling, you'll see my Scorpio come out real strong. I'm also just probably a little nervous because I'm going to tell a personal story today. It's my own story. I typically don't necessarily speak about this at my lectures, but as I was preparing for this lecture over the last year, again and again and again, the message came to me, you need to tell your story. So thank you for allowing me to give you my experience. Before we get into some of the details, I want to just give you a couple of overviews. First of all, we probably all ask these questions. Why did I choose the parents I chose? Why did this kid choose me? And so what we are going to work with over the next hour is to address those questions from the perspective of evolutionary astrology. As the case with anything in EA, everything is observation and correlation. Everything must be understood in the context of the soul in question. When we look at parent-child dynamics, we must also understand them in the context of the chart overview, which for us is the karmic dynamic, Pluto South Node, ruler, etc., and the evolutionary intent, which is where the soul is intending to go, which is more or less polarity point, North Node, ruler, etc. So that's always a background for any chart as you start to look at that. When we work with this observation correlation concept, we start coming into what I've termed the environmental conditionings. What's the reality that the soul came into? These parent-child dynamics that we're going to share. And by the way, I have done this handout right here. You all have it, so you don't have to quick scribble it down. This was the handout. Turn your page over. That's all my planets in the 9th house. So when we start working with the parent-child dynamics, what we start to grasp is those environmental conditionings. So what I did not put down on this piece of paper that I want each of you to write down is 5 things that we're going to learn from all of this today. And I'm going to refer to my notes so that I make sure I get them right. First of all, we're going to find out the conditions that each soul was born into, their reality. I short-term this the environmental conditionings. We're going to find out from the perspective of the soul or the child how it perceives its reality. We're also going to find out from those same dynamics how the child perceives the parents and how the parent perceives the child's reality. In other words, this is point 2 and point 3. The perception from the child and the perception from the parent of the child. That's what we call the dual focus in parent-child dynamics. In other words, the same chart dynamics we're going to look at is going to describe both sides of the equation. Clear? For everybody? We are also going to understand the self-imaging that any soul brings in. In other words, how does it perceive itself, and then from that, all of its trust and security issues. Think of Cancer, 4th house, and the moon. Internal security. We will then also come to understand the type of maturity that any adult will grow into, how they will operate out there in the world. And as I'm listing these, if you want to call it more than 5, fine. But how they will mature into the world and become an adult and become their own parent. Think of Capricorn, 10th house, and Saturn. And then these dynamics will also help us understand what we know as gender issues, or the anima animus. As we know, all of us, coming through multiple lifetimes, go back and forth. Some lifetimes female, some lifetimes male, some lifetimes crossing over. One of the areas of research that Jeffrey had done over the years was on gender issues. And one of the tidbits that he had found was that whenever you saw the moon in the balsamic phase to Saturn, the possibility of gender mutation was starting to happen. In other words, what we would know in our modern world with our young ones is the LBGT, lesbian, gay, transsexual. I abbreviate it. We'll talk about this in specific with our second chart, who is my 16-year-old stepson. I'll go into details with some of these gender issues and working with that. So I probably listed more than 5, but you can get the grasping of what we're going to be looking at. So when we go through all of these principles in anybody's chart, in any soul's chart, that's the information that you are going to be able to grasp from that. And that's a lot of information. I mean, look at it. How many of us here are unconditioned by our parents? How many of us spend our lifetimes trying to uncondition from our parents? So these dynamics are real. They just reflect what all of us know in our innate knowledge from within ourselves. Now, in my little Pluto Virgo fashion, allow me to do this. I sat on this for a while and was pondering it, and going, okay, I think I've got it all together now. And yesterday we were coming here, and I read the departure time for our flight wrong, and I had us ready to go at I don't remember what it is. Anyway, I had us at the airport 2 or 3 hours early. We both had walks. Anyway, I reviewed this, and all of a sudden it popped in clear, crystal clear. I have an 8 and move this one to 9. Number 8 is planets in Cancer, Capricorn. Planets in Cancer, Capricorn. Back row, anytime you can't hear me, just go like this. Planets in Cancer, Capricorn.
I'm sorry, did you say you were going to start with that?
No, I said put number 8 here and make phasal relationship of Moon Saturn number 9.
Oh.
Yeah, interjected. Thank you. So if you will look at 1 through 4, you'll see that we're dealing with everything from the 4th and 10th house, the planetary rulers, aspects to the planetary rulers, planets in the 4th and 10th. Remember this thing. And then if you look at, get this right. So if you look at then 5 through my new 8, you'll see that we're looking at Cancer, Capricorn, planetary rulers, Moon and Saturn, their aspects, and planets in Cancer, Capricorn. All right, so there's 2 sets that you can just work your way down the list through. And then we'll always consider that phasal relationship between the Moon and Saturn. By the way, that phasal relationship between the Moon and Saturn, that's going to relate to that beginning list that I gave you. What is the early nurturing for any soul? Why did it draw it in? How does it perceive the authority of the parents in its environment? How does that affect how it grows up? All of those things are describing basically the phasal relationship between the moon and Saturn. Just for any of you new beginners, evolutionary astrology always looks at any planet in a relationship to every other planet. They're all in relationship to each other by a phase, and then aspects fill it in if they're there. To find the phasal relationship, you always start with the slower moving planet, counterclockwise to the faster moving planet. That will give you a phase and perhaps an aspect. But when you're trying to get through the confusion of aspects, work with phase first, fill in the aspect. All right? Now, when we look at these, I put them in an order, but I could have reversed the order. One of the things that Jeffrey would teach is that these dynamics are all holistic. They work synergistically. You can start anywhere in this list and find where you want to go. I like it the way that he used to use it as example, which is that he would have a tendency to start on the 4th and 10th house cusp and then fill in the blanks from there. So that's what we're going to work with. Now, the information that I've just shared, we could spend a whole day on, if not a week. So, getting it to an hour. As we go through our next 3 chart examples, we are not going to go in detail with every one of these. Your own minds are going to start clicking, and you can start making your own notes. You've got questions, ask me questions. Obviously, it's my story. I know all the details, filling in the blanks, etc. So I'll try to make it, because we're condensed for time, as efficiently as possible for you. Everybody with me so far? All right. Guess whose chart is first? Female. Again, the chart will not tell you the evolutionary state. That was another thing I didn't mention, so you can work with that. You've got the charts on your handout, but they're kind of small. Apologies to those of you over 50. Don't feel too bad. Over 40. The chart doesn't tell you the evolutionary state, nor does it tell you the gender. So I put the gender in for you, obviously, and most of us have the ability to observe that when we're speaking to anybody. I consider myself to be first stage spirituated. I was born in San Francisco, as you can see, for the tape, October 24th, 1957, 12:43 p.m., San Francisco, California. I was only there long enough to come in. Then my father got out of the military, went back to the Midwest, and I have lived my entire life except for 1 year in the northern plains of South Dakota. I like to say I'm a California girl hiding out in the northern plains. So if we start to look at this from those dynamics, and you've all got your sheets to refer to, what we're first going to start looking with here is this sign that's on the 4th house cusp, its planetary ruler, aspects going on, and sign up here on the 10th house cusp, its planetary ruler, the aspects that it has going on, etc., etc. You will also notice here that Capricorn is on the 1st house cusp, ruler Saturn. Cancer's on the 7th house cusp, ruler Moon. And so when you start to look at this, as with almost everything in evolutionary astrology, it relates to Pluto, we ask those questions, why? Why does the soul choose this chart? Why did I choose this chart? What is it about my soul that would choose to come in with Taurus on the south node, which would mean my early environmental conditioning had a Taurus factor to it? What are the Taurus factors? Security, resources, survival. To cut to the chase, again, watching the time, I am, through my own past life recovery process, aware of multiple lifetimes with my parents this time around, and lifetimes with each of them. What I want to briefly talk about is 2 lifetimes in which they were both my parents. In one lifetime, these were both in the Middle Ages. In one lifetime, both of these times, my father in those lives, father today, mother in those lives, mother today. The gender stuff stayed the same. In one of those lifetimes, my father was responsible for my mother's death when I was a toddler. So between 2 and 3, all of a sudden, Mom was gone. I lost a resource. Pretty big resource. Lost it to trauma. Okay? In the other lifetime, I was taken away from my parents by invading people when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And I was actually taken off to be a geisha girl. And I fought so hard, I hurt my hip. And to this day, I have a real sensitivity in my left hip. Well, because I always had a limp, I never went anywhere as the geisha girl. More on that story to be continued. But again, in my childhood, I was extremely codependent, 8th house Pluto, on my mother. I did not like my mother to be out of my sight. My mother worked for a living. She was one of those farm wives that went off the farm and started working. Not only that, my mother worked a split shift. She was a telephone operator back in those days. She worked 8 to 12 and 4 to 8. Twice a day, my mother left me. And so I really had this drawing in here of how am I going to survive. And of course, if you're raised in the country, on a farm with animals, you learn about life and death and survival issues pretty darn fast. Cats, dogs, you know, the whole animal thing, the life-death thing, boy, talk about getting that right out of the chute with these parents my whole life. Yeah. So, again, I gave you the clues rather than asking you the questions. The past life issues with these parents in which mother was taken away, I was taken away from them. All of the Taurian resource, survival, abandonment issues. Now, today my parents are both alive. They're retired farmers. I get along with them pretty good. As you can see from this right here, Venus ruler, conjunction to Saturn right up here. My mother is one of my best friends, always has been. Every time we've come together back and forth, we've been very close. When I opened my door to metaphysics, my mother came with me. So she's always interested in this kind of stuff. She's always wanting to learn. She's always calling me up, asking me metaphysical questions. Sag, 11th house, right in here. So again, this is something I haven't said yet. We have a tendency to want to think that the 4th house in Cancer is mom and the 10th house and Saturn is dad. It's the nurturing parent, authoritarian parent, and they can be reversed. The child will always have a perception of one parent being more authoritarian than the other. And they can easily tell you. You know this if you operate with clients. What's your relationship with mom and dad? They'll usually tell you which one that they had the easier relationship with. Once in a rare while, it's both of them. You know, it just depends. My third chart, Libra, will be on the 4th house cusp, and both parents are equally involved in this child. And so, mother is a very close friend. So, it's an interesting thing to have Saturn right there with Venus. There's the survival issues again, okay? But also, in adulthood, Saturn, my mother is a friend. Okay? Let's go to my father. Up here on the 10th house cusp is where we're going to perceive the reality of what our parents bring us into, the conditioning of their environment. I put my mother at probably first stage individuated, probably moving into second. I put my father at third consensus. And again, if you're new to the evolutionary states, observation, correlation, it's not something you learn overnight. It is something, as with almost anything in life, practice, practice, practice. I always tell people, go to the post office and the grocery store if you want to practice. Everybody you usually utilizes those two areas. So up here in the 10th house cusp with Scorpio, and you see that moon up there, right in there, 23 Scorpio, 10th house. All right, you can see that we can start to bring in some emotional dynamics from my own self-image that was very suppressed in this lifetime. 8th house Pluto, South Node 2nd, all these survival issues. As I recover past life memories, I'm like, well, did I ever live to old age? And as a matter of fact, when I had my first reading with Jeffrey, one of the questions I said, will I live to be a senior citizen? And he said, South Node Taurus, this time, yes. But back to right up here in this 10th house cusp with this moon in here. I lived with a father who was a rageaholic. I never had physical abuse, but I had emotional and verbal abuse. So imagine, as many of us can recognize, individuated spirituating, you're born to consensus parents. You know, and here's another tidbit for you. When you are looking at, sorry to sidetrack, this is important, I got to do it while I remember. When we are looking at all of these dynamics, these primary considerations that you have the list for, they will describe the perception of the child of the parenting. They will describe the perception of the parents parenting the child. There's usually an evolutionary discrepancy. Because, one, each successive generation coming in is automatically going to rebel to the previous generation. And if you have these different evolutionary states, more evolved souls born to less evolved parents, no black, I'm not trying to be better than, less than, just simple words. Or in the case of my own stepson, bringing in a third stage consensus son, being raised by 3 first spirituated parents. So that in and of itself creates the evolutionary discrepancy. So coming in, again, with this overall 8th house Pluto South Node, and then this authoritarian energy right up here, and this Capricorn rising. All I can remember growing up with my father is the screaming and the yelling. And I never knew when, at a moment's notice, my father was going to lose it and rage. So you learn, what does Capricorn rising learn to do? You hide. What does Pluto in the 8th house do? You hide. What does South Node in Capricorn do? You hide. Bedroom, trees on the farm. I would hide in the shelter belt. All the planets in the 9th house. Now, my father is not a bad man. He's just doing the best he can do. So from the perception of my parents, they were trying to survive as farmers. And the early years weren't so good. And everything is life and death on a farm. You have a bad windstorm come through. You have bad weather come through. You lose half the crop or the whole crop. You lose half your herd because a late spring storm, it's life and death out there. There's no playing on a farm. And so my father grew up in this type of an environment and shared it with his daughter, brought it into his daughter. Also, when I was in my early 20s, I found out that my paternal grandfather was responsible for my grandmother's death. When my father was 13, 14 at the end of World War II, German farmers, spare the rod, spoil the child. Well, German farmer hit his wife. She hit her head against a cast iron stove and she never woke up. When my father was 13, I then understood the source of all of my father's raging. He lost his own mother due to his father. And so, it's been a real recovery process. When I first started astrology, Sun in Scorpio, Moon in Scorpio, look at all the Scorpio, the 8th house, I couldn't figure out what Moon in Scorpio was. 10th house. It was so suppressed, enmeshed. It took me a long time to figure out the Scorpio Moon. It took me a long time to figure out my own raging, my own source of rage, lifetimes, and lifetimes, you see Uranus square the nodes right here in Taurus, Scorpio, just bringing in the overall conditioning with this. You know, lifetimes of back and forth on the issues of power and powerless. Again, we could talk forever. I don't have the time to go into it all. I'm just trying to relate the stories that relate to all of those primary considerations about these dynamics. So, what kind of a parent do you think I'm turning in to be? No worries. Yeah, he's still alive. Oh, so just briefly, if you would think about this, all of this early conditioning right here with my own fourth house, do you think I'd turn out to be the type of parent who always wanted to make sure my kid had food, my kid had clothes, my kid had the pencil that he needed in school, that, you know, if there is a physical need that the child needs, that was part of my conditioning. So I am now going to pass that nurturing imprint along. Up here, 10th house. How's my kid going to make it in the world when I'm bringing up kids? You know, because of all of my imprinting and the Capricorn rising, 8th house Pluto, coming off of the northern plains. You know the dirty 30s? I was one of those, even though I came later. That was my imprinting. And so, man, life is serious. You've got to go out there and find your way in the world, and you have got to find how to get out there in the world and make it in the world and all those kind of things, all that Scorpio power energy that comes out. Now, what I have been able to do as time has went by with that 10th house Scorpio is channel that as I've learned my own self-reliance, little polarity point, second house, as I've learned my own self-reliance, then I have learned how to empower others. So I have been in process of shifting from being my rageaholic imprinting father to learning how to empower the child. And that would be the highest form of what you would see up there with Scorpio. Instead of taking the power away, empowering others. Make sense for everybody? All right. I'm watching the time. I'll come back. I'll give you some tidbits on this chart. You've still got it to refer to. Any brief questions before I go on? All right. First of all, I want to show you a cutie. This is my son. He turned 16 on Thursday. And he was absolutely adorable when he was born. Now, I am stepmom, okay? I am stepmother. And I have to tell you a little story about him first. This was last year at the school play. His high school was one of the first high schools in the country to get to do Phantom of the Opera. And he was an usher. And a very handsome kid. Gorgeous, gorgeous baby. Just so that you guys aren't questioning about this, everybody wants to know this story. When he was 1 year old, he was born in Rapid City. When he was 1 year old, his mom called me up. She was taking some of my astrology classes, and she talked me into making a house call. I don't do house calls. The client comes to me. But, so I went over there. Yeah, I went over there and I did a reading for him when he was 1 year old. And so I met my husband at the same time that I met my son. Only at that time he was this 1 year old in diapers with these big old eyes, and I looked at him and I had this instant flash, oh, his mom and dad aren't going to stay together. And I'd be like, oh God, I don't know if I say that. You know, yeah, you bring those things in. And so anyway, when he was 2 years old, his mom and dad split up. I stayed friends with both of them. When he was 6 years old, somebody set me up on a blind date with his dad. I hadn't seen him for a few years. It clicked. We got together. So when he was 6, he came into my life as my stepson. He came to live with us when he was 10. And we have him now. He's been with us for 5 years. We're into year 6. He is a sophomore. But the real interesting point that I wanted to share with you, and you'll get this when you see all the Taurus Scorpio between us. When I first met him, I met a group of people in town who wanted to promote me as an astrologer. His mom has been one of my biggest promoters. Her and I are very close. And she was promoting me with all of her girlfriends and having a bunch of us over. And here was my son, whose name is Forrest, by the way, FG, for Forrest Gabriel. And here we were with this group of women. And he's running around in these little diapers. He's as cute as a bug. Everybody, all the women are oohing on over him. I'm sitting in a chair, and somebody sits him on my lap and says, "Ooh, look at those two cute little Scorpios together." And I go, "Get this spoiled brat off me." My inside voice, thank you. Yeah, it was the inside voice. My Scorpio energy was so shocked. I didn't say anything. Everybody was laughing and cooing and cawing and thinking how cute we look. And I'm like, I'm frozen in this revelation going, holy. So can you, it took 4 years after they split up before I would even look at the possibility of my life partner, who is the love of my life. So the story will continue with Forrest, his dad, and I. But let's work into his chart right now, okay? So you've all got his chart. Again, first of all, very quickly, the chart overview. We got an Aries soul. When I see Pluto in the house, I syntax into Aries soul. And he's got a south node in Aries. You see that you've got Uranus and Neptune square these nodes. If you start to look at this chart, you're not only going to see a lot of dynamics with the 4th house, 10th house, and Cancer, Capricorn. You're going to see those dynamics start to draw in a whole bunch of Pisces. This is a child who has Pisces on the 4th house cusp. He's got Moon Saturn in new phase in Pisces. He's got Sun in the 12th, Mercury in the 12th. He's got the ruler of the 4th house, Neptune, square the nodes. Okay? He's got the ruler of the 10th house, Mercury, conjunct one of those nodes, square the ruler of the 4th house cusp. Did you get all that? So there's a lot going on here, isn't there? All right? So let's ask the questions. Why would this soul draw in the parents he drew in? Why would this soul draw in a stepmother like me? I'll tell you the answers, but I want you to just ponder, because this is how we do it. What is it that this soul needs to learn about being out in the world that he drew in Virgo on the 4th house cusp? Grounding. Yeah. Yep. Yep. First house, Pluto, south node in Aries. Do you think there's a focus on self, 4 planets in the first house? Think there's some lessons in relationships? Okay, there's the overall chart review. Going in, I know. Here's my Scorpio. I told you it would come out. So if we go down here and start looking at this, oh, by the way, Capricorn intercepted 2nd house, Cancer intercepted 8th house. Okay? Another tidbit for evolutionary astrology. Traditional astrology always wants to say, when you see intercepted signs, wow, they're trying to get that energy out, they don't know how to express that energy. Evolutionary astrology says, maybe, maybe not. Observe, correlate. When you see intercepted signs, you want to look at the rulers of those signs and see if those rulers have a lot of planetary aspects going on. How active are they in the chart? And if you look at it, I have the count. You guys can take the count. There's a whole bunch of aspects in Forrest's chart. There's 8 aspects to the moon. There's 3 to Saturn. When you start looking at all of that, what evolutionary astrology has observed is that sometimes these signs have been so emphasized in past lives, they don't need to be emphasized in this lifetime. They naturally express themselves outward. Okay? And so, Another tidbit with the chart overview that I just want to touch upon. We all know this generation, if you know these souls born in the middle 90s that have that Uranus, Pluto conjunction, balsamic new phase. In 95, they had it square the nodes. And so, and in Forrest's chart, he's got it right down here in the second house, the Taurus house. Oh, those resources again. Anyway, what you will observe in this soul is that he has skipped steps in regards to facing reality. Skipped steps with responsibility. Capricorn. So, giving you that tidbit, here's this early environmental conditioning and nurturing that he was born into with both Saturn and the Moon in the 4th house. He came into an environmental conditioning in his first year of life, where both of his mother and father were in financial situations that they could spend 24/7 with him the first year of his life. He was nothing but nurtured, coddled, brought into this world. My intuition tells me, well, I'll back up. I'm going to give you another tidbit on this little soul, young man. When I did get in a relationship with my partner, Media Monk, and I brought in this 6-year-old who by then was already showing his strong will, put 2 Scorpios together, whose will's going to be the strongest. And I recognized that, whoa, I'm going to be his mom, and he's going to live with me someday. One of the things that Leroy and I did, Jeffrey was still doing readings, and we had a reading with Jeffrey. And as any of you have experienced that, and it's not that Jeffrey's the only one. That's why we're all here in the room. We all aspire to be like that. But I was blessed with the insights that he could give us, and he said, he's coming here to atone with you two. And it will take everything you've got to be a united front. And when he said that, he said not just you two, but with his mom and her partners. All 4 of you must be on the same page with the strong will. So I suspect that the reason he came in with this type of nurturing was because he's got some realities he doesn't want to look at from past lives. And he has experienced a most recent past life as a young child starving to death. And it could be part of his soul. The other thing that Jeffrey had shared with us, he's coming here to atone. He wants to atone. He wants to change. Remember that. Whew. Okay. This Capricorn, Neptune, Uranus square the nodes. This Capricorn intercepted in the 2nd house. This is a soul who just automatically knows the universe is going to give him every resource he needs. Perhaps there's been a little abuse with resources. Mom and Dad, you can afford to buy me XYZ. Why can't I have it? And so Mom and Dad are up there giving him the process. Remember my 10th house Scorpio? Trying to explain the whys. He didn't want to hear it. Here's another tidbit for you. Bio mom, I'm bio mother, other mother. I'm other mother. Bio mom is right down here. She has Neptune square the nodes. Their composite chart is a 12th house Pluto with a south node in Pisces. We call them pillows and pizza. It's just all pure. I'm in the room with Mom. And so here I am. Here I am. Do you think he hears me? Go ahead. Somebody said but. Go for it. Yes. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. We are finally starting to see the tide change. Last year was a really tough year. But we really see the difference this year. There were quite a few Scorpio explosions last year. I won't go into the details. But exactly. And Leroy and I always are thinking, he's going to tell us he wants to go back to mom. He's going to tell us he wants to go back to mom. He's going to tell us he wants to go back to mom. No, he doesn't. We don't hear that. So something within this soul recognizes that he's got to recover these skip steps. He's got to learn these relationships. He's got to learn how to be real in the world. And that's what he lives. Leroy and I have composite Sun, Venus, Jupiter, Virgo, 6th house. You think we got a few details and rules in our house? I'm the Pluto Virgo. So yes, that's exactly it. Now, and there's so much new stuff going on for this soul. You know, this is new phase. Oh, back to the gender issues. You saw him. As he was young, he was very feminine looking. Moon, new phase, Saturn, gender switch. I suspect that he was female in that. I heard from a psychic, but I never knew what gender they said he was when, as someone said, his last life he starved to death. I assume maybe perhaps a she. But very feminine looking, okay? And when he was in 8th grade, of course, you know how kids are today in this patriarchal conditioning. Instead of building each other up, we tear each other down. So he was always the one that would be teased, forcing back to that first house Pluto stuff. What is it, my relationship lessons that I need to learn in here? He would always be teased. And so he got the courage to stand up in his English class and give a speech on gay rights. He brought out the posters, he had everything. He got the highest grade you could get. We put the poster on our living room mantle for months, because he's being raised to first spirituated parents. He's being raised with the openness that he can choose where he wants to be. We don't care. You know, and we had conversations about, oh well, you know, believe it or not. And so he was given the choice, and we now believe that he is interested in girls. So I think he's made his choice. But he was teased with that label, and so he chose to do the first house Pluto defense. I'll show you with that. And it really was a really good thing for him when he did that project, because it brought him an understanding of other people and the whole gender issue thing. You know, it brought up all these gender issue conversations in our household with him. You know, well, how do you feel? Well, what do you think about other people who are that way? You know, and the young kids don't have as many hang-ups about it as we do, or the older generations do. And so we never told Pluto in Cancer, paternal grandma and grandpa what he did. I don't think we shared that one. But I don't mean to digress, but I think as you hear these stories, you can follow around with all of this. Now, this is a child, again, who is coming from the womb of mom and dad, and all the women in his life, and women just fall over him. So he just comes from this womb of feeling that everybody's going to catch me, everybody's going to love me, everybody's going to take care of me. It has been a shock for him to come into this environment and find a woman who doesn't go gaga over him. And so it's had lots of conversations, and it's been part of his wake up. And, you know, even to the conversations, you know, I don't hate you, Forrest. I care about you enough that I have to teach you this. These are my responsibilities to teach you as a parent. Leroy goes back and forth between both of these. If you would ask this child, who's the nurturing parent? Mom and Dad. Who's the authoritarian parent? Him. No question. But he's having to learn this responsibility in having to learn how to listen to us. There's a lot of selective listening in here. And the moment he gets emotionally triggered, he's gone. So we really have to work with communicating with him and repeating the communications. Okay, actually, his bio mom was, because she had him till he was 10, she came up with the best Virgo rule. She said, you can only give him one assignment at a time, because that's all he can hear, and tell him to do that assignment and then come back and get the next one. And so that's how we functioned with him. Because, as you know, boys have a tendency to develop their brains later than girls. Boys don't develop their brains fully until their early 20s. And with the first house Pluto, I thought he'd be really early with everything. But with this 12th house sun, all of this environmental conditioning down here in his early environment, he didn't want to grow up. He wanted to stay on the couch. He wanted to snuggle between us until he was too big to fit on the love seat between us. And then he still wanted to be there. Still, that's the other thing. The the animus issues. Cancer Capricorn is always about non-sexual touching. And one of the ways that you break down the Capricorn barriers is through the sense of touch. Just through the sense of touch. And when I'm working with clients, how I'm telling them, especially if you by any chance have two people in an intimate relationship and all this stuff is going, on, and I just say, you guys have to learn how to sit down in face of each other with your chairs, put two chairs down, touch knees. Nothing touches but the knees must always make contact. Touch hands. Hold the contact. Because that will keep that communication going when Capricorn wants to shut down. If you're in a non-intimate relationship, you have to just sometimes learn how to sit side by side or hold hands. So when Cancer, because look at how touchy-feely Cancer is in Capricorn. My father was a 10th house Pluto. He never hugged me. He never touched me. I didn't have the physical abuse, but I never had physical touch either from my father. And so the way to break that down with Capricorn is to find that non-sexual touching until there's a sense of safety. And what it does is it allows people to recover that sense of trust from the womb. Does this make sense with everybody? So, sorry to digress, but important tidbits. So here's this, I don't want to leave the womb. And he's kind of having to be forced out into this world. Our saving grace is that there is enough of this materialism. To his credit, I do believe that he's moving first stage individuated. And that's why he drew in 3 first spirituated parents. There's always, go ahead. Oh, thank you. Yes. To me, right here, you put this right here, look at these 2 planets here in Capricorn, square the nodes. I don't want to face reality. I don't want to go out into the world. I want to stay in the womb. So he chose a family environment that would be totally womb-like until he could get a sense of, I want everything in the world. His skip steps are lifetimes of excessive material resources and being the one in charge, and lifetimes of poverty, loss, I'm all alone. Okay? But sure. Getting to that. Want to give you that environment. Okay? So with that Saturn retrograde, it will not only say where we have refused to look at reality in the past, but it will also show us how we're opening the door beyond the limitations of our realities. That's what you're looking for. Okay? And so with his Saturn retrograde then, retrogrades will point to that polarity house, that polarity sign, that can help you understand that retrograde. It's pointing for him to come out into that world. Come out into being real Virgo in that world. Okay? Also, the other thing of it is, look at the signature. Saturn, Pisces, retrograde, 4th house. first stage spirituated parents. He is really being opened up to metaphysics on a really crash course level, whether he wants it or not. You know, he told his mother he was an atheist and just about broke her heart. She called me up. And I said, Mom, I'm going to call her Mom. I said, I think he meant agnostic. And then when we explored it with him, that is what he meant. He says, I'm agnostic. He said, I don't like what the kids who are religious say at school. So that's what you're asking for. That's what that retrograde's doing. Saturn, when Saturn's retrograde, it opens the door to the unconsciousness, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Okay? And so, but I was being too specific right here in his chart. Any other little questions? I'll share one more tidbit with you. Oh, I'm keeping pretty good on time. Why are the three of us together? If you would draw up our composite chart, we have about 5 or 6 planets in Scorpio in the 11th house. 10th house Pluto. Remember me being the geisha girl? Hurt my hip. So, you know, I didn't get anywhere. So what did I do? I happened to fall in love with one of the young soldiers who was in charge of guarding all the geisha girls. And I kissed him. And I lost my life. The person I kissed is my husband, Leroy. And the person who killed both of us is Boris. He does not know that yet. It's on tape. If he chooses to watch the tape, this is how he's going to find out. Scorpio shock. But he does know that it hasn't been exactly pleasant between us in the past. He's gotten that one down. But, you know, we can, when we do get in sync with our Scorpio stuff, we're pretty good together. You know, we got all these little idiosyncronicities, whatever the word is. We both like the same chocolate, the same ice cream. We both have the same likes and dislikes and all that Scorpio stuff that goes on. And it's kind of, you too. So as he's maturing, that stuff is coming out to be much smoother. There's a friendship that's actually coming in. All those Scorpio planets in the 11th house, as they pass the traumas and the rage, they can actually get to the friendships. Question? Yes? Yes, yes. That's been my whole thing that I've realized. You know, when remember the little kid sitting on my lap, and I'm like, have this, and I've shared it with his mom. I said, it took me a few years to share it, but as we were going through everything, I finally shared it, and I said, I got to tell you this. And so that's it. And so back to that question, why do we choose these parents? Why do these kids choose us? I'd never come in, I wouldn't choose to come into a relationship based upon that. So the synchronicities, the mysteries, the beauties of the universe bring us together that way. And that's the karma kids that so many of us have. Yes? Yes. Yes. I am also aware of a lifetime where Forrest was my father, and in a drunken stupor, he killed me as a 7-year-old boy. Yeah. 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 I walk the cliff a lot.
Whenever you refer to family, composite chart, relationship chart, which methodology do you use? Do you use midpoint composite or one of the traditional chart, composite chart?
Midpoint.
Can you
Yeah. Solar. Oops, sorry. Don't mean to be so loud. Sorry. But first of all, I want to know that I heard your question correctly. When I do the composite chart, do not do the Davison split in the date-time data. No. Take 2 charts and do the derived ascendant. Some people use derived midheavens. But solar fire, wind star, I don't know about Kepler. They will all take group charts, multiple charts that you can put in. And that's a good thing to do because then you get the dynamics of a family. I mean, I have a couple of of local clients where one of my best girlfriends just had baby number 5 just before we left. So I have to go home and add in the 7th person to the family. 4th house composite Pluto in the group.
So you ultimately you're really creating a midpoint. You're making a pattern between the 5 of you.
Yes. Well, yes.
You don't want to do it by hand on paper.
Yes.
It's really about listening.
Yes. Gotcha. Yes, yes, because, okay, let me explain and clarify for you, so for those of you who need to follow. If you took somebody who has, let me do this simply. Let's do it, I'll do it this way. If you took somebody who had a 6th house Pluto and somebody who had a 10th house Pluto, the midpoint between the 10th and the 6th would fall in the 8th. That's what she means. So what the computer does for you, it's the midpoints by sign and house. And when you start to get into a group, then it takes the midpoints of 3, 4. Mm-hmm. Okay, so question way in the back. To heal the karma. To heal the karma. You know, okay, thank you for asking that question. Now I'm going to cry. The question was, why did I choose this son? To heal the karma. I mean, you know, imagine raising a child that you know has been responsible for taking you out. And taking you out with the one you loved. And now you're here with the one that you love. And this child has to make peace with that. Whew! Okay. Yes, first stage spirituated work with the consensus son. And I take that back. I really do believe this is his work to transition into first stage individuated with us, because he doesn't fit in that consensus world. And that consensus world is just rejecting that first house Pluto all over the place. And what did I do? Did I do that? Okay. Yeah.
And just looking at how there's all the karma in Mars, the ruler of the South Node, is also the feminist falls right on unique Saturn.
Yeah. Yeah. You start looking the synastry between our two charts. It's amazing. Yeah. My North Node sits on his sun. He's here to evolve my self-image. No. I like my mountaintop. Any other questions? I got one more, and I'm pretty good on time. This one's going to be quick because this one's brand new. But this one's very sweet. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to tell you the trauma, I better tell you the little joys, okay? This is one of my karma joys. This is one of our best couple friends to Leroy and I. This is an unexpected little soul who came in last December. They have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, and all of a sudden, oops! And after they got over the shock, and he came in, and he was born last December. And this, you can't see forget about this. You can't see Bio-Mom, but this is Bio-Mom with the two of us out on the lake. We went camping together, big family campground thing this summer. And this is me holding Griffin. His name is Griffin. This is me holding him as we're pulling the boat with his bio dad water skiing on the back end. And this is the moment that I had the flashback. This is the child that I lost in the gas chambers in my last life. And so when he was born, of course, his mom used to come in. His mom and dad are very, very natural. very organic from A to Z. And, third individuated, first spirituated, very evolved, 2 little kids that come in, or their older 2 children. And so she would always bring them into the city that we reside by every week for various lessons, music, dance, etc. And so she would come in every week if she was pregnant, and she'd work out of the house with us. And then after Griffey was born, she would bring him over every week, and I would get my baby fix. I never had biological children. Okay, no biological children, no abortions, blah blah. And so she would bring him in, and from the very first moments, the very first weeks that I used to hold him, he would do nothing but smile at me. Put him in Kim's lap, and he would do nothing but smile. I never had the flashback when he was born. It wasn't until, and here's where I got to give credit to Patricia and Roger Wilder for deep memory processing. In my 30 years of searching, I've not found a past regression technique that works better than this. And so I've spent the last few years, when Pluto went into my 12th house, searching past life regression techniques, wanting to recover my anger with Forrest, which DMP was the best thing for Forrest and I healing. But when I was finishing up some of my training this summer, I was born in 57. I'm aware of a lifetime as a young male. This is cute, crashing my Snoopy airplane. But I'm blank between then, and I, had the happy little Neptune thing. Well, I just didn't come in, and I ignored all the gas chamber stuff and the concentration camp stuff, and you hear all the stories when you're going through past life regression therapy. And so this summer, we were learning the induction methods to the childhood triggers. And so I brought up a past life memory of being a mother. The husband was gone. The big extended family was gone. I was pretty much left in the house by myself with 3 children, and I was pretty much starving myself. Remember my 4th house cusp, Taurus? I was pretty much starving myself trying to nurse a baby. And this was Griffey, and in that life, he was a she. And so here's the chart. And so when you look at this chart, the karmic dynamic, okay, Pluto conjunct the North Node. This is one of the variations. When Pluto's conjunct the North Node, the polarity part is not where the soul is intending to evolve. The soul is intending to stay and evolve right there. South Node, planetary ruler, can still be involved in the karmic past, but this becomes the karmic past and the evolutionary intent. Okay? So I saw Griffin's chart before I saw him. And when I, because all my friends, Kimberly, it was 6:54 p.m. It was 8:27 a.m. You get those kind of messages. And so when I first saw the chart, I was like, whoa. And he was very slow. He was like 2 weeks past due. And very tiny. Very, very tiny. So when I made the recollection this summer that he, I don't remember how old he was when I lost him. But he was like, obviously starving like I was. So he comes in this lifetime, very tiny. He is not developmentally delayed, but the physical body is very slow, Virgo 6th house to come in. Another one where these souls, we've got to come here. Okay? All right? And by the way, I told Patricia I'd tell this joke today. He came in with a mama who's got plenty of milk. Oh, so, 4th house, watching time here, okay? I'm going to speed up a little bit. 4th house cusp, Libra, ruler, Venus, Scorpio, in the 4th house. Saturn, in the 4th house. Do you think we would have a child from what I just described about him physically that could be very, very needy and helpless and innocent at the point of coming in? We don't have time to do all the karma. I mean, there's probably a lot of stories involved here. When I sense this child, I sense in a very innocent soul. But there's this neediness that if I don't have all of this nurturing going on right here, I will not survive. Scorpio, same thing as the polarity with Taurus. So he has two parents. Actually, he has two parents and two older siblings. He has four parents, not to mention Aunt Kimmy and Uncle Leroy. But he has just family. He has two parents that are just totally nurturing of him. You know, the homeschooled children, you know, the everything that we would consider to be natural law. So he's very, very nurtured right here with this. Now, right up here, this perception, this fourth house cusp, can you see how this early environment, if he's nurtured enough, and if he is felt loved and needed, that then they're going to have to help him break out into the world. Okay? He might be another child that wants to stay here, but with all of this, he'll make the effort most likely. And he's got his siblings, you know, his older brother and sister are very, very good at working with him. Everybody works to help him just get in the body and move the body and work with everything that's going on there. Now, again, he could have the perception of both parents in here of being nurturing, and my guess is he probably will because natural law environment. So it will be interesting to see which parent is pushing him forward. His dad's a fourth house Pluto, his mom's a fifth house Pluto. My guess is it'll be mom who's going to be perceived as, I'm very willing to love you unconditionally, but it's time to push you off my breast. So we're picking up these steps. Oh, you will notice right here. Here we go again. Square the notes. Okay, and in his, it's up here in the ninth house, coming into this natural law environment, but having all of this, even just if you just look at the lifetime with me, the gas chamber, the trauma with mother. Okay? And so he's got these skip steps that he's going to have to recover and really be in the world, be in his body. So does this stuff make a question?
Yes, it was wonderful. Thank you for now. I take the ride, so I really love family dynamics for communication. And Alvin, your honesty, sharing your own.
Thank you.
But my question is really about you. And whenever we're talking about Taurus and that two sons conjunction North Node,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of order would you see like?
Evolutionary astrology uses very wide orbs because when you use the cycle of phases and aspects, new, crescent, first quarter, gibbous, bull, disseminating, last quarter, balsamic, everything is in process to everything else. Everything's in relationship to everything else. So phase first, aspect second, wide orbs.
What was revealed to me was
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to Pluto in the nodes, I'll use 10 degrees on either side because you see it coming, you see it going.
well, I see it in
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but
Have we found perfection on this plane yet? Is everybody hearing this okay? Everybody hearing okay? All right. I'm watching my time. I have just a couple more minutes. Any other questions? Does this make sense? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. When I first saw him, I was like, is he in there? Very, very tiny. And right now, he's 11 months old, and he's just barely learning to crawl. It's, well, I'm coming from my personal filter and how I lost him. And so imagine a baby's coming in and they don't get to live and they die as a baby. Imagine coming back the next time. I don't want to be here. You know. So he's got to recover just from being gassed in a gas chamber, starving, you know, those types of things. So there's this energy. But so then the question becomes, and I stay tuned for future classes, why? I haven't quite figured that one out yet. Stay tuned. Yes. You're fine. You're asking good questions. No, good questions.
I've worked in medicine my whole life. I've spent a lot of time witnessing the care of young babies that die within days, weeks, or months. And also, I have worked with lots of children below the age of 7 in oncology who develop tumors in this infection. I always had your chart as amazing. And what I came to understand as I witnessed also the dynamics around those children, and let me tell you something, you spend time with children who have severe cancer of any type, it will change you very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
They have such deep, soulful, wise eyes. They are more consumed, they feel acceptance of everything that's going on around them. And the worst part is the pain that's associated with pain. And why I bring this up is because I think there is this house has everything to do with mental conditions. And karmically speaking, I've always asked myself the question, so why do these children and what purposes it serves karmically? And what I can see is that these children, even if they live 3 days, or 3 months, or 3 years, and then they develop cancer, and they're going to die next month, and we know that. It brings all the family dynamics into close proximity in such a concentrated, focused manner that the child becomes the wisdom teacher to the family as a whole dynamic. It's incredibly beautiful for us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very easily one of the ways that we are making attempts to heal all this patriarchal conditioning. You know, again, with evolutionary astrology, any archetype can be used or abused. Any archetype can be distorted or naturally expressed. And as evolutionary astrologers, one of the first things that you'll learn, well, you'll learn it again and again and again. Careful of projecting. Because anytime you want to project what you think those dynamics are in the chart, you're going to draw on a client who's going to teach you something new. Yeah. So I can only, yes. Well, oh no, I have the memory. But what's the larger picture going on here? This is where I said stay tuned. I have to explore. Is this a spiritual masochist or was he an asshole? You know? My relationship with him is one of healing and innocence. But that doesn't mean that's going to be his overall nature.
Is it possible that it could be your memory, but not part of his past? It's in his chart.
The signature's in his chart. How much more explicit do you need to be to die in a gas chamber on your mother's breast? Yeah. Sorry. All right, again, we're running out of time, so I have one more thought that I want to leave you with, okay? This is a lot of information to synthesize in this little bit of a time period. So what I would invite all of you to do is to take this listing of all these primary considerations and really start practicing with this and working with this in your charts with the whole Pluto formula. Because as you do that, and start with your own chart, you're going to learn a whole new wealth of information on your own chart. You're going to rediscover your inner child and why you drew in the parents you drew in, and why you drew in the consensus reality that you drew in. And as you discover that and work with your healing of your own inner child, you will metamorphose your own inner adult. And you will metamorphose how you parent. And when we get to relationship astrology, you know, it's exciting and sexy to do it with intimate partners. But this, Jeffrey would always say, this is some of the real work. This is real work. Because when we heal family dynamics, we heal the planet. And what are we here to do, Pluto and Capricorn? Cancer polarity.